As musky anglers, we have hundreds of thousands of baits to choose from, and I have a lot of them, and there's certain specific characteristics from each bait that make me choose one over another, even though they might be very similar. First off, we're going to start with crankbaits. I've got two very similar crankbaits here. I've got a 9-inch crankbait and 8-inch crankbait, both a wide wobble. They act very, very similar in the water, but when I go to grab a crankbait, I want to look at the wind most importantly. This bait here has a much wider wobble and is going to push a lot more water than this smaller profile bait here. As well as with the wind, these fish are going to get much more water pushing off the sides of this bait and help them feel the vibration of that bait more so in a heavy wind versus in a lighter wind. You might want to be a little bit more subtle and not push quite as much water with a little bit smaller profile minnow bait like this one. Another one would be rubber. Rubber catches a ton of muskies, and there's a lot of different rubber baits on the market. I've got two of the most basic ones that you see. I've got a Medusa and a Bulldog. If you're fishing shallow cover or are looking to push a lot of water, I generally like to go towards the Medusa. The Medusas are a little bit wider on the belly and have a little bit more hang time in between your pulls, and the tails also aid in that hang time as well, so you can fish them slower over shallower cover. I think they're a really great bait that push a lot of water with the amount of surface area the rubber has, but if I want to fish deeper, a Bulldog is a really great option. It's very aerodynamic under the water and fishes a lot deeper and doesn't quite push as much water if you're looking to be a little bit more subtle. So it all depends on the situation of which bait I want to grab, if I want to fish shallow or if I want to fish deep. Next is a bucktail, right? Musky fisherman's favorite bait. I have two very, very similar lures here. They're both double 9 baits. They both have 2 hooks on them. Great musky catching tools. Big difference here is this bait here has very thick blades. Okay, these are a heavier blade than this bait here. First thing that's going to do is this bait here with the thinner blades is going to push a little bit more water. Seeing that the blades are lighter, they're going to stick out a little bit more and they're going to push more water. If you grab the heavier blades, they're a little bit heavier, so they're going to tilt back a little bit more and they're not going to push nearly as much water. Also, you'll see that these clevises rest right on the stainless steel, or on this bead here, where this bait here has a plastic washer in between. So this bait is going to make less noise with these clevises rubbing on the plastic versus clevises rubbing right on a bead. More subtle, more aggressive. Also, a thing to not overlook with a bucktail is the thickness of wire. This is 0.62 and this I believe is 0.45. The thickness of your wire is going to have a lot to do with the sound the bucktail makes in the water and the amount of vibration. The thinner the wire, the more vibration a bucktail makes. The thicker the wire, the more the vibration is dampened. So your heavier bucktails are a little bit more of your subtle baits, and your thinner bucktails are more of your aggressive or loud baits. Last is topwater. Everybody loves fishing topwater. I've got two very similar topwater baits. I've got one that's a little bit bigger, obviously one that's a little bit smaller. You can throw this in with a lot to do with time of year, if you want to go a smaller profile or a bigger profile. I like to choose one over the other based on wind. The more windy it is, the bigger the topwater bait I want to go with. Due to all that water moving, you want to push more water with your bait and have a little bit more presence in the water versus a smaller bait. So I think these are a few things to help you guys figure out which bait do I pick out of all mine for a certain situation on the water.